Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to learn a little bit about questioning strategies. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. So we're going to talk about the purpose of questioning, why as educators we do this. I'm sure this is obvious, but just to fill some people in. Then we're going to look at different types of questioning, and then finally we're going to look at how you can sequence your questioning for different styles of learning and different styles of reasoning among your students. So we can go on and on about some of the purposes of questioning, but among the many different reasons why an educator might choose to do some questioning with their students is assessing understanding. So as an educator, as a teacher, you want to see how well your students understand a concept, an idea. You want to get an idea of their thought process behind something. And so you might ask questions to assess their understanding, whether for assessment purposes, formative or summative, or whatever that may be. And so this is, of course, one reason. Another reason, and this is a little bit of a higher purpose, if you will, is to make students aware of their ignorance. Sometimes students don't know what they don't know. And so you as a teacher, you might ask them a question that you know the students do not have the answer to it, but you want the students to be aware that they don't know. So if you're teaching a new concept, for example, in mathematics, they've never seen it before, like a variable, you might ask them, what is this? You know they're going to say, I don't know. You're setting them up for it. And then you go on to explain what a variable is or whatever you teach. And so this is another powerful way that you can use questioning, not just for assessing understanding for some sort of a summative or formative reason, but also to help students to discover things they may not know that you want them to know. And then a last reason that you may choose to use questioning, again, there's way more reasons than these three, is to help maintain attention. So we know that students struggle to absorb content, especially in a passive manner for long periods of time. So you might throw in some questions to assess their understanding just to keep them engaged, and awake as you go through the material or as you're discussing something together with the students. This is another rule. It's kind of like a classroom management type purpose. So again, these are not the only reasons or the only purposes for asking questions, but these are just some that you need to be aware of. Now, in general, there's probably only two types of questions, and these can be either convergent questions or divergent questions. And what we mean by convergent is these are questions that have one answer. So to give you an example on the screen, what time is it? It can only be a certain time at a certain time. I hope that makes sense. And so these are questions that only have one answer. How much money do you have right now? That's another way. Or what color is your car? There's only a certain answer for these type of questions. And these questions often assess lower level thinking as defined by Bloom's taxonomy, memorizing, summarizing, etc. They're very constricted in the choices that a student has. It's very easy to assess these in terms of what is right and what is wrong. Another type of question is divergent. And these are questions that have multiple answers. So, who is the greatest athlete of all time? Or where's the best what's the best restaurant in town? Or, what's the best color? Or who's the, whatever. These are lots of questions that have lots of different answers. And so they often involve higher level thinking. So, judging, critical thinking, analysis, synthesis, because not only do you have to develop an answer, you may have to develop a criteria for how you came about that answer, or you may have to defend your choice using examples and logic and reasoning. And so divergent questions allow students to reach higher levels of thinking, again, as defined by Bloom's taxonomy. Now, with your knowledge of the different types of questioning, you can also structure or order your questions in various sequences for various purposes. So if you want to focus on inductive reasoning, which is where you go from example, example, example to develop a general conclusion, you can start with convergent questions and move to divergent questioning. So going from questions that have one answer to questions that have multiple answers. And if you want to focus more on deductive reasoning, which is where you have a general premise and then you start to develop examples of that premise, you will start from divergent questioning and move to convergent questioning. And these are just some sequences. There's others, as we will see in a few moments. But let's take a look at each of these. So here's a famous example of something that can be used for inductive reasoning. And so remember, with inductive reasoning, let's go back here. You start with a convergent question and you move to divergent. So you might ask the students, okay, what do you see in this picture? Generally, there's probably going to be one answer. You're going to see a woman who's smoking a cigarette through her throat. This is a very famous picture, by the way. And so then you might ask them some other questions to, again, spur thought. And you might say something like, so what do you think about smoking after seeing this picture? That is obviously we call it a divergent question because there's multiple answers about how they see this and what they think about it. And they can share their opinion about what they think about smoking after seeing this person. And the student might say they think it's bad for you or whatever. But the premise here, or the point, if you will, is that we start with a convergent question. What do you see? There's probably only one or two answers there. And then from there, you ask a question that has multiple potential answers. And that's just one way of doing this. Now let's move to the next one. This one doesn't have a picture, but now we're doing deductive. So we're going to start with a divergent question, a question that has multiple answers, and then focus down on a convergent question. So you ask the students, what do they think about smoking? What do you think about smoking? They'll say it's good or bad. They say it's up to the person, whatever. There's lots of different choices. They might say it depends on the situation. Sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's not. They might say it's up to the person. You don't know what your kids are going to say, which may actually be a caution for divergent questions. If you're not ready as a teacher for crazy answers, you might want to avoid divergent questions. So they start to share what they think about smoking, whatever their opinion is, their position. Some people might say it's cheap. Some people might say it's expensive. Let's say they go down a path of talking about the cost. Once the subject is switched to the cost, you as the teacher can ask them, okay, how much does the average person spend on smoking per year, as an example? And so generally there's probably one answer for that. I mean, of course, we're keeping this simple. There's multiple surveys on this, different ways to analyze it, blah, blah, blah. But again, as they explore the cost of smoking cigarettes, it helps to inform their position on whether they think smoking is good or bad, whether they think it's cheap or expensive, whatever. And so this, again, helps them to develop a thought process, a sense of logical flow. One of the real challenges that students are having, in the classrooms is that it's not that they don't have an opinion, is that often they just have an opinion without any kind of support. No matter if you take a boring topic or a controversial topic, people have a position without support. And so to take the next step in terms of a traditional approach to developing critical thinking is to have students to have whatever beliefs they have with support. And being able to ask questions and to develop thought processes with your students through these questions is a powerful tool that can hopefully improve this. Now, there are other sequencing styles that we're not going to cover here, and these are kind of similar, but not exactly the same. You can start with simple questions and moving to complex questions, or vice versa. Or you can start with broad questions, like a question about an entire book maybe, and then move down to questions within chapters or within paragraphs. Or you could do vice versa, starting with specific questions about the book, maybe within a few pages, and then scoping out to the chapter, and then to sections, and then finally to the entire book, whatever works for your style. And these are things that you can explore on your own. So to try to wrap this up and bring a conclusion to this video, we took a look at, questioning what it is, some different strategies that you can use to approach it. So we talked about the purpose, helping kids to uncover what they don't know, checking in on their understanding, using it as a classroom management tool to keep students engaged. We also talked about the types of questions, which can be convergent or divergent. Convergent questioning is, of course, only one answer. Divergent has multiple answers. And then we looked at sequencing, primarily from a perspective of, developing reasoning skills, inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. So, my name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you so much for watching, and you take care.